she's staring at.
Where did you learn to fly?
Uranus. Oh, piss off. That's what we called it back then. This is Cybermorph. Yes, the allegedly infamous Cybermorph, released in 1993 for the Atari Jaguar home video game system courtesy of the Atari Corporation and developed by Attention to Detail. And this was actually the pack-in title for the old Jag, and I'll give Atari credit, in theory at least, it's a better choice for a pack-in title than something like Pole Position on the 7800, which... Okay, so whenever you buy a new console and it comes with a pack-in title, that title is usually the first impression a newcomer would have to the hardware. Pole Position 2, all due respect, is a fine game on its own, but as a pack-in title for the 7800, probably not the best choice for that first impression, especially when you looked at the competition available at the time. Cybermorph at the very least looked like a game that shows off what the Jaguar was capable of, and yeah, nowadays it's not that great, but back in 1993 you'd look at this game in action, you'd go, hey, that's pretty damn sweet, I'd like more of this. And that's the kind of first impression a pack-in title should be making on a newcomer. It should get you excited for what else this cat has to offer, which, by the way, the Jaguar only had 2 titles available at launch, and it was either this or Trevor McFur, and given the choice for a pack-in title, sorry, but I'm going with the green bald lady, and anyone who says otherwise can go fly a kite. Trevor McFur makes Keith Courage look like a badass. But I digress. Cybermorph has a pretty straightforward premise. You pick a planet from the main screen, and each planet has a number of power pods you have to collect. So you're using your radar to seek out these power pods, and then once you've collected the minimum amount, the transport portal will open up and allow you to exit the planet and pick another. The radar also tracks any enemy targets that may be in attack range, as well as other potential targets of interest. You have a variety of tools at your disposal. Main blasters to shoot things, bombs to blow up structures such as buildings or gates, the aforementioned radar to give you a general direction on where to go, and also your onboard computer represented by the rather notorious green bald lady, who will pop up and sometimes warn you about things such as low power, as well as occasionally commenting on your less than stellar flying skills. Yes, having a green floating head questioning your flying skills whenever you run into a mountain might be annoying, but at least it's better than crashing into a random structure and losing a life, and then getting stuck in said structure after respawning, which results in another crash and another life lost in seconds flat. Yeah, brilliant. Besides, the head is far from the worst backseat driver ever conceived. If anything, she's being way too kind on you, but I digress. There's a bit of a mixed reaction of sorts when it comes to Cybermorph. Some consider it to be one of the worst games ever made. Others feel it's not as bad as people claim. Few would even consider this an underappreciated gem. And yeah, you hear the horror stories and all the memes and shit, and you naturally expect the worst. But I gotta be honest with you folks, I didn't think Cybermorph is that bad of a game. Not by a long shot. Mind you, I wouldn't call it great or anything, there's some nits to be picked here, but I was expecting a lot worse going into this, and instead, I got a game that is nowhere near as ambitious as it strives to be, but is an otherwise above average offering. The controls take a little getting used to. You've got a fire button, 2 buttons to control your speed, a button to cycle through your weapons, and a keypad's worth of different camera angles if you feel like using them. But once you get the hang of things and realize that you don't need to be flying full speed, and thus that'll keep you from crashing into terrain, and thus you get less of
Where did you learn to fly?
Control is actually quite fine. It's not nimble, but it is functional, and it's responsive. Mind you, with a Switch Pro controller knockoff thing, of course control's going to be fine, but still, while there are some nagging bits with Cybermorph, Control I feel is not one of those things. The game boasts a total of 50 planets about for you to explore, and some of these planets are somewhat straightforward in their layouts, while others are a little more open-ended, which piques a bit of curiosity and exploration. Regardless, your goal remains the same. Collect the minimum pods required to take back control of the planet from the bad guys. Some pods are out in the open, while others require you destroy a certain enemy or target in order to free them from captivity. Sometimes you need to resort to other means to uncover these pods. Point being that throughout these 50 planets across 4 or 5 sectors, I believe, of space, your main goal of collecting pods will remain the same, but the means by which you need to collect said pods will vary. And that's pretty much the main goal throughout your game, and Cybermorph doesn't veer from that central objective, which runs the risk of making the game seem a bit repetitive when played in the long term. Fortunately, the game has more than enough random things tossed your way that'll keep things interesting enough, and it also features a password system of sorts that lets you skip to other sectors in the game, which is awfully nice of them. But more than likely these days, you'll probably be playing this on the Atari 50 compilation, which features save states and thus negates the needs for passwords, but let's set that piece of business aside and appreciate that there's some semblance of progress being recorded on this old cat. Cybermorph was one of the early console attempts at using fancy 3D polygons for its graphical presentation, something that was more of a domain for video arcades and home computers, who could probably pull the stuff off a little better, and through modern eyes, it's not exactly high definition. The frame rate isn't particularly smooth, often on the verge of breaking when there's too much going on. The draw distance is rather poor, which makes anticipating terrain particularly difficult when flying at high speeds especially, which gives you more of,
Where did you learn to fly?
and let's be honest, the rather drab colors doesn't make the scenery all that appealing. But the actual ship models don't look too bad. You can make out little structures like bridges, trees, and things of that nature. The mountains are actually quite smooth looking with occasional bits of jagginess, but not much. And I do like how your cockpit sort of falls apart whenever you die. I like it less when it happens often, but still, it's a nice little detail that I appreciate. Again, it doesn't look like much today, but by 1993 console standards, Cybermorph is the sort of first impression that you'd want to sell a console on, at least visually speaking. Now, one thing that will be lame no matter what is the audio output. Cybermorph only has a few musical selections, and to be honest, they're not all that great. Some generically weak-sounding techno bits that don't play during the actual gameplay, which is odd. I've noticed this with a number of Jaguar games where the music will not play during the actual gameplay portions. It's a bit of an odd quirk. But regardless, the tunes themselves are not all that fantastic. They could have used a few more llamas behind the wheel in that department. The sound effects aren't too bad, even if they're somewhat stock-sounding explosions and laser blasts and stuff. And of course, the infamous voice that speaks to you with surprising clarity for the time is actually not too shabby. Overall, Cybermorph is a more than serviceable, bordering on fairly enjoyable little flying game on the Atari Jaguar that isn't quite as bad as I've heard. Yes, it's a game with more than its fair share of technical issues, and it's not going to appeal to everyone, but once you get the hang of things, there's quite a bit of fun to be had with Cybermorph. And for a pack-in title, it served as a nice little introduction to the Jaguar's capabilities, and if nothing else, set a standard for other games on the console to follow, for better or worse. And that was Cybermorph, kids. Will it sell you on an Atari Jaguar these days? Probably not, but it's a decent little shooter that I'm happy to have sampled after all these years, thanks to the almighty Atari 50 compilation. And if you have a copy of said compilation, couldn't hurt to give this game a shot. Who knows, you might actually like it. Or maybe not. Depends.